In the gilded heart of the celestial spire, a palace carved from moonstone and suspended above the emerald clouds of the planet Varelia. Music drifted through crystalline corridors like liquid starlight. Nobles in shimmering silks and diplomats from a dozen star systems mingled beneath vaulted ceilings that bloomed with bioluminescent flora. It was the Grand Convergence, a rare diplomatic gala where peace treaties were whispered over wine and alliances forged with a single glance. Amid this glittering throng stood Confronting, a human envoy from the Terran Concord, known more for his sharp wit than his political acumen. Tall, tousle-haired, with eyes that crinkled when he laughed too hard, Confronting had been sent as a token gesture. Earth's way of saying we're still here without actually committing resources. He didn't mind. He liked parties, and he especially liked beautiful strangers. That's when he saw her. She stood apart from the crowd near a fountain of liquid silver, her presence commanding silence without a word. Princess Lyra of House Zintra, green-skinned like polished jade, her long hair the color of winter frost, cascading past her waist in soft waves. Her ears tapered to elegant points, and her eyes, large, luminous, and the deep violet of twilight storms, watched the room with cool detachment. She wore a gown of living silk that shifted hues with her mood, currently a restrained indigo. Around her neck hung the tear of Zintra, a gem said to amplify the wearer's emotional resonance across light years. Confronting had read about her, of course, the sole heir to the Varelian throne, rumored to be brilliant, ruthless, and utterly uninterested in suitors. That last part, he decided with a grin, was clearly a challenge. He didn't approach with ceremony. No bow, no formal introduction. Instead, he sidled up beside her as if they'd been chatting all evening and said, "If that fountain were any more dramatic, it'd start quoting poetry." Lyra turned, one sculpted eyebrow lifting. "It already does. You're just not listening." Her voice was low, melodic, with a faint harmonic undertone common to her species. "Ah," Confronting said, feigning awe. "Then I must be tone-deaf. Or perhaps I'm just distracted by more compelling sights." She didn't blush, Varelians didn't, but the silk at her collar flickered toward rose gold. "Flattery is a blunt instrument, Terran, and you wield it like a child with a plasma torch." "Ouch," he said, pressing a hand to his chest. "But accurate. I've never claimed finesse, only enthusiasm." For the next hour they danced, not with their feet, but with words. He teased her about royal protocol. She countered with dry observations about human impulsivity. He told her a ridiculous story about getting lost in the Concord's archives and accidentally activating a centuries-old cleaning drone that chased him through 3 sectors. She laughed, a rare, chiming sound that made nearby courtiers turn in surprise. Confronting, emboldened by wine and the sparkle in her eyes, leaned in and whispered, "You know, if you weren't a princess, I'd ask you to run away with me to some backwater moon with terrible coffee and worse weather." Lyra studied him, her expression unreadable. "And if you weren't a human with a death wish, you might survive long enough to regret that offer." He grinned. "Worth it." Then the chime of the hour bell echoed through the hall, deep, resonant, signaling the end of the first night's festivities. Lyra straightened, her playful mask slipping back into regal composure. "Enjoy your stay, Confronting," she said, using his name for the first time. "Try not to flirt with the warlords. They tend to take offense." He bowed dramatically. "Only with princesses, your highness." She walked away, her white hair catching the light like spun silver. Confronting watched her go, still smiling, already planning how to find her again tomorrow. He thought nothing of it. Just a charming interlude, a spark in an otherwise dull diplomatic slog. He returned to his quarters in the East Wing, humming, and fell asleep with the memory of her laugh still warm in his mind. He woke to the sound of armored boots. Before he could sit up, for Varelian royal sentinels stood in his chamber, tall, blue-skinned warriors in iridescent armor, pulse rifles held at ready. Their leader, a stern-faced officer with a scar across his left brow, spoke without preamble. "By order of Her Royal Highness Princess Lyra, you are confined to these quarters until further notice. Attempt to leave, and you will be detained by force." Confronting blinked. "Wait, what? Why?" The officer didn't answer. He simply activated a shimmering energy barrier across the doorway and stepped back. "Do not test her patience, Terran." The door sealed with a hiss. Confronting stared at it, heart pounding. Confined? For flirting? It made no sense. Unless, had he offended her? Misread the signals? He replayed their conversation, searching for missteps. Nothing stood out. If anything, she'd seemed amused. Intrigued, even. Hours passed. No one came. No explanation. Just silence and the low hum of the palace's atmospheric field. Corrin paced, restless. He tried the comm panel, dead. The window overlooked the cloud sea below, beautiful but useless for escape. Frustration coiled in his gut. He wasn't a prisoner. He was a guest. Weren't there protocols? Rights? Then, just as dusk painted the sky in violet and gold, the barrier flickered off. A single figure entered. Not a guard, but Lyra herself. She wore a different gown now, deep crimson, and her expression was unreadable. But her eyes, they burned with something raw, something urgent. "You shouldn't have said that," she said, voice tight. "Said what?" Corrin asked, bewildered. "About running away." She stepped closer, her white hair glowing in the fading light. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "No," he admitted. "But I'd love an explanation that doesn't involve house arrest." Lyra exhaled sharply, then turned to the window. "The tear of Zintra isn't just a jewel, Corrin. It's a bond. When a Varelian of royal blood experiences a moment of profound emotional resonance, true connection, vulnerability, desire, it imprints. And if that moment is shared with another, the tear records it. Permanently." Corrin frowned. "So, because I joked about running away, because I wanted to," she whispered, turning back to him. Her violet eyes glistened. "Because for the first time in my life, someone looked at me and saw a woman, not a crown." And the tear knew. It broadcast that feeling, not just to me, but to the entire royal court. To my father. To the High Synod. Corrin's stomach dropped. "They think we're bonded?" "Worse," Lyra said. "They think I've chosen a consort. A human consort. In the middle of peace negotiations with the Cthari Dominion, who view interspecies unions as abominations. My father is furious. The Synod is demanding I renounce you publicly. And the Cthari ambassador..." She trailed off, jaw clenched. "What about him?" "He's offered a solution," she said bitterly. "A duel. To the death. He claims your blood will cleanse the insult to Varelian honor." Corrin stared at her. "You're joking." "I wish I were." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "But I won't let them kill you. Not for a moment of foolishness. Not for this." She gestured between them. "So I gave a new order. Don't let him leave," Corrin finished, understanding dawning. "Yes," she said, "because if you leave this palace, they'll take you. And if they take you, you die. Here, you're under my protection. My authority." He ran a hand through his hair. "So I'm your prisoner to keep me alive?" "You're my responsibility," she corrected softly. "And possibly my only chance." Before he could ask what she meant, alarms blared through the palace. Sharp, pulsing shrieks that turned the air electric. Red emergency lights bathed the room in blood-colored glow. Lyra's head snapped toward the door. "They've breached the lower sanctum," she said, eyes wide. "The Cthari. They're not waiting for a duel. They're taking the fight to us." Corrin didn't hesitate. "What do you need me to do?" She looked at him, surprised. "You'd fight for me?" "I'd rather not die in a fancy room," he said, grabbing a ceremonial blade from the wall. "More decorative than functional, but better than nothing. Besides, I kind of started this mess." Lyra's lips curved into the ghost of a smile. "Then stay close." They raced through the palace corridors, now chaotic with panicked nobles and mobilizing guards. The Cthari warriors, hulking, chitinous figures with obsidian carapaces and glowing red eyes, swarmed the grand atrium, their energy whips cracking through marble pillars. Lyra moved with lethal grace, her hands weaving patterns in the air as she summoned defensive shields of pure light. Corrin, meanwhile, used his knowledge of human guerrilla tactics, distracting, dodging, using the environment. He toppled a statue onto a Cthari, jammed a data slate into a security panel to trigger lockdown protocols, and once, absurdly, threw a tray of canapes into a warrior's face. Was that necessary? Lyra shouted over the din, blasting a Cthari with a bolt of emerald energy. "It was a really good brie," he yelled back. Amid the chaos, they reached the sky bridge, a narrow walkway connecting the spire to the royal armory. Halfway across, a Cthari warlord appeared, blocking their path. Taller than the rest, adorned with bone trophies, he hissed. "The human dies first. Then the princess bleeds." Lyra stepped in front of Corrin. "You will not touch him." The warlord laughed, a sound like grinding stone. You cling to your pet like a child. Pathetic. Corin tapped Lyra's shoulder. Hey, remember that plasma torch comment? She glanced back. Yes. Time to show them how blunt I can be. He shoved past her, sprinting straight at the warlord. At the last second, he dropped low, sliding beneath the creature's legs, and slammed the ceremonial blade into a glowing joint in its armor. Sparks flew. The warlord roared, stumbling. Lyra seized the moment. Her hands flared with white-hot energy, and she unleashed a wave that sent the warlord crashing through the bridge's railing, tumbling into the clouds below. Silence fell, save for their ragged breaths. You're insane, Lyra said, but there was awe in her voice. Comes with the species, Corin panted, grinning despite the terror still humming in his veins. They reached the armory, where loyalist Varelian soldiers were regrouping. But the battle wasn't over. The Cthari had activated a resonance bomb, a device designed to destabilize the spire's anti-grav core. If it detonated, the entire palace would collapse into the planet's molten mantle. We have minutes, Lyra said, scanning the tactical display. The bomb's in the core chamber. Only someone with royal biometrics can disarm it. I'll go with you, Corin said. You'll slow me down. Maybe, he admitted. But you'll be faster if you're not worried about me getting captured or killed up here. She searched his face, and for the first time he saw fear. Not for herself, but for him. Why are you doing this? He shrugged. Because you didn't let them take me. Because you could have denied everything and saved your throne. But you didn't. And because... He hesitated, then met her violet gaze. Because I meant what I said. About running away. I just didn't know it'd involve saving your palace first. Something softened in her expression. She reached out, her green fingers brushing his cheek. Cool, smooth, electric. Then stay alive, Corin Vale. I intend to collect on that offer. The core chamber was a cavern of pulsing light, the air thick with ozone. The bomb, a writhing sphere of dark energy, hovered above the central console. Lyra worked furiously, her hands dancing over glyphs only she could read. Corin stood guard at the entrance, pulse rifle in hand, watching the corridor. They came in waves. Thari warriors, relentless. He fired until the rifle overheated, then used his fists, his wits, anything. He took a glancing blow to the ribs that made him see stars, but he held the line. Almost there, Lyra called. Then, a new figure appeared in the corridor. Taller, armored in black and silver, face hidden behind a horned helmet. The Cthari High Commander. Corin's blood ran cold. The commander strode forward, ignoring the rifle pointed at him. You fight well, human. For an insect. Flattery will get you nowhere. Corin shot back, though his arms trembled. The commander drew a curved blade that hummed with deadly energy. I do not seek your favor, only your end. He lunged. Corin dodged, barely, but the blade grazed his shoulder, searing through fabric and flesh. He cried out, stumbling back. The commander advanced, relentless. Then Lyra screamed, Corin down! He dropped. A beam of pure light erupted from the console, striking the commander square in the chest. The alien staggered, smoke rising from his armor. But he didn't fall. You cannot stop fate, princess, he rasped. The Concord will fall. Your world will burn. And your human pet, he raised his blade, will die forgotten. With a roar, Corin charged. Not away, but into the commander, tackling him off balance. They crashed to the floor, grappling. The blade skittered away. Corin drove his elbow into the alien's throat, again and again, until the grip on him slackened. Behind him, Lyra slammed her palm onto the final glyph. The bomb's dark energy collapsed inward with a deafening crack, then vanished. Silence. Corin rolled off the unconscious commander, gasping. Lyra rushed to his side, her hands glowing with healing energy. You're bleeding, she said, voice tight. It's not that bad. He lied through gritted teeth. She knelt beside him, her white hair falling like a curtain around them. You could have run, hidden. Let me handle this alone. And miss all the fun? He tried to smile but winced instead. Lyra's expression shifted, fear, relief, something deeper. She cupped his face in her hands, her violet eyes searching his. Why didn't you run? He looked back at her, her green skin smudged with soot, her white hair tangled, her gown torn, and saw not a princess, but a woman who'd risked everything for a moment of honesty. Because, he said softly, I think I'm falling for you. The words hung in the air, fragile and bright. Lyra's breath caught. The healing light around her hands flared brighter, warmer. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Outside, the alarms ceased. The palace stabilized. The Kthari forces, leaderless and demoralized, began to retreat. But in that quiet chamber, none of that mattered. Hours later, as dawn painted the clouds in gold and rose, Corrin sat on a balcony overlooking the recovering city. His wounds bandaged, a warm drink in his hands. Lyra joined him, dressed in simple robes now, her hair loose. The synod is in an uproar, she said, leaning against the railing. My father demands I exile you. The Kthari are threatening war, and half the court thinks I've lost my mind. And the other half? She looked at him, a small smile playing on her lips. The other half is placing bets on how long it takes us to elope. Corrin laughed, then winced again. Ow! Remind me never to tackle a warlord again. You won't have to, she said, stepping closer. Not if I have anything to say about it. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. Her skin was cool, but her grip was firm. So, he said, about that moon with terrible coffee. Lyra's eyes sparkled. Only if you promise not to flirt with the locals. Deal, he said, but I make no promises about princesses. She shook her head, but she was smiling. And for the first time in her life, Princess Lyra of House Zintra didn't feel like a crown. She felt like a woman. Scared, hopeful, and utterly wonderfully alive. And somewhere, deep in the heart of the celestial spire, the tear of Zintra glowed with a soft, steady light. No longer broadcasting crisis, but something far more dangerous, far more beautiful. The quiet, undeniable pulse of a love that refused to be denied. The fragile peace that settled over the celestial spire in the days following the Kthari attack was as thin as spun glass, beautiful, but ready to shatter at the slightest pressure. Corrin, now officially under Princess Lyra's personal protection, was granted a suite adjacent to the royal wing, though granted was a generous term. The High Synod had convened in emergency session, their voices echoing through the palace like thunder trapped in stone. To them, Corrin wasn't a hero. He was an anomaly, a human variable in a cosmic equation that had functioned flawlessly for centuries. Worse, he was proof that the royal bloodline could be swayed by emotion, by something as reckless and illogical as affection. Lyra visited him every evening, always cloaked in twilight, always guarded by two silent sentinels who never entered the room but stood just outside the door like statues carved from suspicion. Their conversations were careful at first. Diplomatic updates, coded reassurances, shared laughter over the absurdity of court gossip. But with each passing night, the walls between them thinned. She told him about her childhood. The weight of prophecy, the loneliness of being raised among tutors and protocols, the way her mother's ghost seemed to linger in the palace gardens. He told her about Earth, its oceans, its chaos, its stubborn, messy hope. And slowly, without either of them naming it, something deeper took root. Then came the summons. It arrived not with fanfare, but with a sealed scroll delivered by a trembling page. The royal tribunal. Corrin was to appear before the synod and the emperor himself to answer for his role in the incident. Lyra's face went pale when she read it. They're not trying you for treason, she said, voice low. They're trying you for influence. The tribunal chamber was a cavern of obsidian and silver, lit by floating orbs that cast no shadows, only judgment. Emperor Varen, Lyra's father, sat upon a throne of interwoven roots from the first tree of Varelia. His green skin etched with the fine lines of age and power, his white hair braided with threads of star metal. His eyes, the same violet as Lyra's, held no warmth as Corrin was led in chains. Not heavy ones, but shimmering bands of null energy that dampened his nervous system, making every step an effort. Corrin Vale of Terra, the emperor intoned, his voice resonating through the chamber like a gong struck in deep space. You have entangled yourself in the sacred lineage of House Zintra. You have provoked an interstellar incident. And you have caused my daughter to act against reason, tradition, and state security. What say you in your defense? Corrin swallowed, his mouth dry. He glanced at Lyra, who stood beside her father, expression unreadable. But her fingers twitched, just once, against the fabric of her robe. A signal. A plea. I didn't cause anything, Your Majesty, Corrin said, forcing his voice steady. I spoke honestly, and your daughter chose to listen. That's not a crime. It's courage. A murmur rippled through the synod. The emperor's eyes narrowed. Courage? or recklessness. You are a transient being, Corrin Vale. Your species lives less than a century. You burn bright and fast, like meteors. My daughter is eternal. Her choices echo across generations. You cannot comprehend the weight you've placed upon her. Before Corrin could respond, the chamber doors burst open. Not with violence, but with revelation. A Varelian woman strode in, tall and severe, her skin a darker green, her white hair cropped short. She wore the sigil of the archives, a coiled serpent eating its own tail. "Forgive the intrusion, Majesty," she said, bowing deeply. "But I bring evidence that changes everything." Lyra stiffened. "Archivist Mela? What is this?" Mela turned, her gaze locking onto Corrin. "This human is not who he claims to be." Silence fell like a blade. Corrin's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" Mela activated a hollow projector. An image flickered to life. A younger Corrin, standing beside a Varelian man with Lyra's eyes and a scientist's robes. 23 Terran years ago," Mela said, "Dr. Jorn Zintra, your uncle, Princess, vanished during a deep space research mission near the Kuiper Belt. He was studying human genetic resilience. What the official records omit is that he took a child with him. A hybrid embryo, genetically engineered, half human, half Varelian." The projection zoomed in. The child's face, Corrin's face, unmistakably. Lyra gasped. "No!" Corrin staggered back, the null chains clinking. "That's impossible. I was born on Earth. My parents were caretakers," Mela interrupted gently, "paid by Dr. Zintra to raise you in secrecy. He feared the Synod would destroy his work, his attempt to create a bridge between our species. When his ship was lost, the truth was buried. Until now." The Emperor rose slowly, his expression unreadable. "You are telling me this human is of House Zintra?" "By blood, yes," Mela confirmed. "His DNA carries the royal markers, dormant but present. The tear of Zintra didn't resonate with him because of flirtation, Your Highness. It recognized its own." The chamber erupted. Synod members shouted over one another, some in outrage, others in awe. Lyra stared at Corrin as if seeing him for the first time. Not as a stranger, not as a threat, but as family. Corrin's mind reeled. All his life he'd felt out of place, too emotional for humans, too impulsive for logic-driven societies. Now he knew why. He wasn't just human. He was hers. He was theirs. The Emperor raised a hand. Silence returned. "Then the question is no longer whether Corrin Vale influenced my daughter," he said, his voice softer now, almost weary, "but whether fate has been weaving this thread all along." But before relief could settle, alarms blared again. Different this time. Not the sharp shriek of invasion, but the deep, mournful wail of planetary distress. The ground trembled. Outside the chamber windows, the sky darkened. Not with clouds, but with ships. Hundreds of them. Not Kthari. "Void Corsairs," Lyra whispered, horror dawning. "They've come for the tier." The Corsairs were mercenaries, scavengers of the Outer Rim, drawn to power like moths to flame. Word of the tier's activation, and the royal bloodline's vulnerability, had spread faster than anyone anticipated. And they didn't want diplomacy. They wanted the gem, and the throne. The Emperor turned to Lyra. "Secure the tier. Protect the spire." Then he looked at Corrin. "And you? If you are truly of this blood, prove it." Chaos swallowed the palace. The Corsairs deployed gravity claws that latched onto the spire's foundations, dragging it downward toward the planet's surface. Corrin and Lyra raced through collapsing corridors, dodging falling debris and energy fire. But this time they weren't just allies. They were kin. In the royal vault, where the tier was kept when not worn, Lyra activated the ancestral lock, a DNA sequence only Zintra blood could open. She placed her hand on the panel. Nothing happened. "It's not enough," she realized, eyes wide. "It needs both lines." Corrin stepped forward. He pressed his palm beside hers. Light erupted. The vault doors slid open. Inside, the tier pulsed like a living heart. But beside it lay something else. A data crystal, labeled in Dr. Zintra's hand. "For the child who bridges worlds." Lyra inserted it into a reader. A hologram of her uncle appeared, aged and weary. "If you're seeing this, Lyra, then Corrin has found his way home. The tier is not just a bond. It's a key. It can stabilize the spire's core, but only if wielded by two hearts of Zintra blood, united in purpose. Not by duty, by choice. Outside, The Corsair flagship loomed, its main cannon charging. "We have to go to the core chamber," Lyra said. Together, they fought their way through the palace's underbelly, side by side. Corrin moved differently now, his reflexes sharper, his instincts eerily attuned to Lyra's. When she raised a shield, he knew to flank. When he feinted left, she struck right. It was as if their blood remembered a language their minds had forgotten. In the core chamber, the anti-grav matrix flickered dangerously. The Corsairs had sabotaged the stabilizers. The spire groaned, tilting toward the molten surface below. Lyra climbed onto the central platform, the tear glowing in her hands. "I need you with me," she called to Corrin. "Not beside me, with me." He joined her, placing his hands over hers on the gem. Instantly, energy surged through them, not painful but profound. Visions flooded their minds. Ancient Varelian star charts, human cities rising from ashes, a future where green-skinned children played alongside brown and black and pale ones under twin suns. The tier blazed with white light. The spire stabilized. Above them, the Corsair flagship shuddered, its systems overloaded by the pulse of pure harmonic energy radiating from the palace. One by one, their ships powered down, drifting helplessly. Silence returned. Exhausted, Corrin sank to his knees. Lyra knelt beside him, her violet eyes filled with tears. "You're not just my consort," she whispered. "You're my brother, my equal, my everything." He shook his head, smiling faintly. "I think I prefer the guy who flirted with a princess and accidentally inherited a kingdom." She laughed, a real, unguarded sound, and pulled him into an embrace. Around them, the core chamber hummed with restored life. But their victory was short-lived. From the shadows of the chamber entrance, a figure emerged, Archivist Mela. But her posture was wrong. Her eyes glowed faintly red. "You played your part well," she said, her voice distorted, layered with something mechanical. "The tear's activation signal was all we needed." Corrin and Lyra froze. "You're not Mela," Lyra said. "No," the figure replied. "I am the Kthari mindweaver." Mela's body was convenient. She stepped forward, revealing a neural implant pulsing at her temple. "While you fought Corsairs, we infiltrated. And now, with the tear's frequency mapped, we can replicate its power. The Varelian throne will fall, not by war, but by mimicry. Our agents will wear your faces, speak with your voices, and rule in your name." Lyra's grip on the tear tightened. "You'll never control it. It answers only to true Zintra blood." The weaver smiled coldly. "Then we'll take your blood, starting with his." She pointed at Corrin. "The hybrid is unstable. His genetics are the key to perfecting our replicas." Before she could move, Corrin did something unexpected. He let go of the tear. The gem dimmed instantly. The weaver hesitated, confused. "You're right," Corrin said, standing slowly. "I'm unstable. Half human, half alien. Never fully belonging to either world." He took a step toward her. "But that's my strength. Because I don't follow your rules. I don't play by your codes. And I definitely don't let imposters threaten my family." He lunged not at her but at the neural implant. With a desperate twist, he ripped it from her temple. The weaver screamed, collapsing as the Kthari consciousness fled her body. Mela slumped to the floor, unconscious but alive. Lyra rushed to her, checking her pulse. "She'll live." Corrin picked up the tear, its light returning as he held it with Lyra once more. "They'll be back," he said quietly. "The Kthari, the Corsairs, maybe others." "I know," Lyra replied. "But now we're ready." In the days that followed, the palace began to heal. The Synod, humbled by the truth, voted to recognize Corrin as a member of House Zintra, by blood, by deed, and by choice. The Emperor, though still wary, granted him the title of Royal Warden, a role with no precedent but immense trust. And in the quiet hours before dawn, Corrin and Lyra would meet in the palace gardens, where bioluminescent flowers bloomed in response to their presence. They didn't speak of thrones or treaties. They spoke of Earth's oceans, of Varelian star nurseries, of a future where love wasn't a weakness, but the strongest bond of all. But far beyond the spire, in the silent void between stars, a single Kthari vessel drifted, its hold filled with vials of stolen DNA, and a single message pulsing toward the Dominion's homeworld. The hybrid lives. The plan evolves. The game wasn't over. It had only just begun. The months that followed were a storm of diplomacy, reconstruction, and quiet rebellion. The Cthari Dominion, though thwarted in their immediate plot, had not abandoned their ambition. Their replicated agents, genetically tuned to mimic Varelian royalty, began appearing on fringe worlds, sowing discord, impersonating envoys, even attempting to forge false peace accords that would bind Varelia to their will. But Corin and Lyra were no longer reactive. They were architects of a new era. With Corin's dual heritage now publicly affirmed, not as scandal but as prophecy fulfilled, the Synod reluctantly approved a radical initiative, the Concord of Two Bloods. It was more than an alliance. It was a fusion. Human engineers and Varelian bioartisans collaborated to retrofit the celestial spire with hybrid technology, gravity stabilizers powered by Terran fusion cores, shield matrices woven from Varelian harmonic resonance, and communication relays that could transmit emotion as clearly as data. The palace, once a symbol of isolation, became a beacon of unity. Corin, once the careless flirt, now bore the weight of legacy with grace. He trained not just in combat, but in statecraft, learning the ancient songs that calmed planetary tectonics and the diplomatic dances that sealed treaties without a single word. Lyra, in turn, embraced the human virtues Corin embodied: improvisation, empathy, the courage to fail and try again. Together, they redefined what it meant to rule. Yet peace remained fragile. The final confrontation came not in war, but in silence. A distress signal, encrypted in Lyra's personal frequency, arrived from the outer colony of Xylos, a moon settled by both humans and Varelians. The message was brief. They wear our faces. They speak with our voices. They are among us. Corin and Lyra went alone, disguised as traders, aboard a small courier ship named the First Breath. On Xylos, they found a community living in fear. The Cthari replicants had infiltrated the council, replaced teachers, even mimicked children. Trust had evaporated. Families slept with blades under their pillows, unsure if the person beside them was real. But Corin had an idea. "We can't fight them," he told Lyra as they hid in the ruins of an old greenhouse. "Not with weapons. They're too good. But they can't fake this." He held up the tear of Zintra, now permanently attuned to both their essences. The tear doesn't just resonate with blood. It resonates with truth, with choice, with love. That night, beneath Xylos' twin moons, Corin and Lyra stood in the central plaza and activated the tear, not as a weapon, but as a mirror. A pulse of pure, harmonic light washed over the colony. It didn't harm. It revealed. Where the light touched a replicant, their form flickered, just for a second, exposing the synthetic lattice beneath their skin. Not through pain, but through honesty. The people of Xylos watched, stunned, as neighbors they'd feared turned out to be real, and others, beloved for years, dissolved into shimmering ash, their false lives unraveling in the presence of truth. No violence followed, only tears, only healing. The Cthari Dominion, watching from afar, realized their greatest flaw. They had built perfect copies, but they could not replicate the one thing that bound humans and Varelians together: imperfect, messy, defiant love. Within a solar cycle, the Dominion recalled its agents. Not out of defeat, but out of something rarer: respect. A new faction rose within their ranks, those who questioned whether domination was the only path. Secret envoys began reaching out, not to conquer, but to understand. Back on Varelia, the Emperor summoned Corin and Lyra to the Heart Garden, where the first tree bloomed once every century. "You have done what I thought impossible," Varen said, his voice thick with emotion. "You have not just saved our world. You have expanded it." He placed a circlet of living silver on Lyra's brow, the crown of shared light. Then, to the astonishment of the court, he placed a matching band on Corin's head, woven with Terran steel and Varelian vine. "House Zintra is no longer one bloodline," the Emperor declared. "It is two, and its future is yours to shape." They were married at dawn on the highest balcony of the Celestial Spire, with Earth's ambassador and a dozen alien dignitaries as witnesses. Lyra wore a gown of white and green, her white hair braided with starlight petals. Corin wore a coat stitched with both Terran and Varelian sigils, his smile brighter than any weapon. There was no grand feast, no parade, just a quiet vow beneath a sky streaked with auroras. "I choose you, not because of blood or duty, but because my soul recognizes yours." Years later, the palace echoed with new sounds: children's laughter. Their firstborn, a girl named Sarah, had Lyra's violet eyes and Corin's stubborn grin, her skin a soft olive that shimmered faintly in moonlight. She could calm storms with a song and fix broken hoverbikes with scrap parts. Their son, Joran, named for the uncle who dreamed of bridges, could speak to animals and recite ancient human poetry in perfect Varelian. The celestial spire still floated above the clouds, but it was no longer a fortress. It was a home, a school, a crossroads where humans, Varelians, and even cautious Kthari scholars came to learn, to trade, to build. And on quiet evenings, Corin and Lyra would sit on their balcony, hands entwined, watching their children chase fireflies that glowed with bioluminescent joy. "You know," Corin said one night, "I once flirted with you just for fun." Lyra leaned her head on his shoulder, her white hair catching the starlight. "And I ordered you confined just to keep you safe." They both smiled. "Best mistake I ever made," he murmured. "Best command I ever gave," she replied. Below them, the world they'd saved and built together hummed with peace, not because war had ended, but because love had finally learned to speak every language. And in the heart of the palace, the tear of Zintra glowed softly, not as a relic of power, but as a promise, that no matter how far the stars drifted, some bonds were written in light and would never fade.